The airport was buzzing with the usual chaos. Luggage rolling, children crying, and flight announcements echoing through the terminal. In the middle of it all, a tall, quiet man sat by gate C-17, his little daughter asleep on his shoulder. To everyone else, he was just another exhausted parent trying to make it home for Christmas. His jeans were plain, his jacket old, and his expression calm. The kind of face that blended easily into the crowd. The boarding pass in his hand read, Seat 12F, Economy Class. His name, Daniel Hayes. Nobody knew that once upon a time. That same name had sent chills down enemy radios, whispered through military channels as the legend they called Falcon 1. Daniel gently brushed his daughter's hair aside and smiled faintly. 5 years ago, he'd been in the cockpit of an F-22 Raptor, commanding the skies over foreign soil. Today, he was a single father, flying commercial, trying to raise a 6-year-old after losing his wife to a sudden illness. He had traded missions for bedtime stories, flight suits for school runs. To the world, he was just Dad. But buried deep inside, the pilot in him still listened for the sound of engines, still felt the pull of the sky every time a jet roared overhead. As the passengers began to board, a group of young Air Force pilots in uniform passed by, chatting animatedly about their upcoming deployment. One of them, noticing Daniel's flight jacket, worn but decorated with a faded patch that read 99th Fighter Squadron, gave him a polite nod. "Nice patch, sir. You serve?" Daniel looked up and smiled mildly. "Used to. Long time ago." The young pilot grinned. "No kidding. My dad flew with someone from that squadron. Guy went by Falcon 1. They say he was a ghost in the sky. Enemy jets couldn't touch him." He laughed, unaware that the man sitting before him was the very legend he spoke of. Daniel's smile deepened, but his eyes softened with something unspoken. Pride mixed with loss. "Ghosts belong in the past," he said quietly. They boarded soon after, and Daniel took his seat in 12F next to the window. His daughter Emma sat beside him, clutching her stuffed bear. She had her mother's eyes, bright and curious, full of light that Daniel sometimes feared he didn't deserve anymore. Midway through the flight, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be flying over an active military training area. You may notice 2 F-22 Raptors accompanying us for a brief escort demonstration." Passengers craned their necks toward the windows, eager to catch a glimpse. Daniel turned too, old instincts flickering alive. Then one of the pilot's voices came faintly through the plane's open frequency, an old habit Daniel still recognized. "Control, this is Hawk 3. Visual on commercial flight 227. Copy escort pattern?" Without realizing it, Daniel whispered under his breath, "Brake pattern 2, altitude 28,000, angle 07. The radio crackled, and then paused. The pilot's voice came again, sharper. "Say again, Control. Did someone just—" Another pause, then a shocked tone. "Did someone just call a Falcon pattern?" Across the cockpit, the co-pilot turned to the captain, confused. No one uses that phrase anymore. That was his maneuver. Falcon 1s. Within seconds, one of the Raptors swung low near the window where Daniel sat. The pilot inside caught sight of him, calm, composed, one hand resting on the sleeping child, and froze. Then, over the comms came a voice trembling with disbelief. "Sir, permission to confirm? Is that Falcon 1? Daniel didn't answer, but he lifted his hand slightly. 2 fingers raised in the same salute he used to signal formation breaks years ago. The Raptor banked sharply in response, tilting its wings in salute. Every F-22 pilot in the area followed suit, their jets glinting in the sun like silver arrows. Passengers gasped, pulling out phones, not realizing they were witnessing history, a quiet tribute to a man who had once protected the skies they now flew through in peace. The intercom crackled again, and this time, even the flight captain's voice carried awe. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we have an honored guest aboard. On behalf of the United States Air Force, welcome home, Falcon 1. Daniel lowered his gaze, emotion flickering through his calm exterior. Emma stirred in her sleep, mumbling, "Daddy, what's happening?" He smiled faintly, brushing her hair again. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just some old friends saying hello." But as the jet soared alongside them, Daniel's eyes misted over. He had spent years running from who he was, from the pain of losing his wife, from the guilt of surviving when others didn't. Yet here, in seat 12F, he realized maybe he hadn't lost everything. Maybe he still had something left to fight for. When the plane finally landed, the applause that had started mid-air hadn't died down. Passengers still whispered excitedly, trying to grasp what they'd just seen. Some said the Air Force had staged a salute for a hero on board. Others thought it was coincidence. But to the crew, there was no doubt. The way those Raptors had moved, the precision, the silent bow in the sky, that was a message only one man in the world could command. Daniel Hayes stayed seated, letting the others disembark first, as always. He preferred quiet exits. But when he finally stood, the flight attendant approached him, her hands trembling slightly. "Sir," she said softly, "the captain asked if you could wait a moment. Someone from the airbase would like to speak with you." Daniel hesitated. Old instincts stirred again. The kind that never really died, no matter how long you'd been out of uniform. He nodded once, adjusted his daughter's blanket over her shoulder, and waited. 10 minutes later, as passengers cleared out, 2 men in dress blues entered the jet bridge, young, but carrying themselves with unmistakable military precision. The taller one saluted sharply. "Colonel Hayes, sir," he said, his voice tight with respect. "It's an honor. We didn't believe it until we saw you ourselves." Daniel froze, unused to the title anymore. He hadn't been called colonel in 6 years. "I'm not active anymore," he said quietly. "Just a father trying to get his daughter home." But the pilot shook his head. "Sir, you'll always be Falcon 1 to us. Base Command requests your presence, if it's not too much trouble. There's someone waiting who wanted to thank you personally." Daniel didn't want the attention. He had buried that life for a reason. But curiosity and something deeper pushed him to agree. With Emma in his arms, he followed the officers out of the terminal and into a waiting black SUV. The car drove through winding roads until they reached a nearby airfield, where sunlight flashed off the wings of F-22 Raptors parked in formation. A group of officers stood waiting, but one figure stepped forward, a woman in her late 30s in uniform, her posture straight, her eyes fierce and familiar. Daniel blinked, stunned. "Captain Rivera?" he asked, disbelief threading his tone. She smiled faintly. "It's Major now, thanks to you. You saved my entire squad in Syria, remember?" He hadn't, not completely. But the memory returned in flashes, fire, noise, and a desperate voice over the radio saying, "Falcon 1, we're hit!" He'd flown into chaos that night, refusing to abandon his team. Rivera saluted, her voice trembling. "We never got to thank you, sir. You disappeared right after. When we heard your call sign today, we couldn't believe it." Around them, younger pilots gathered silently, reverence in their eyes. Daniel felt something shift inside him, the old ache of loss replaced by something warmer, something like belonging. He set Emma down gently, and she clung to his leg, peeking up shyly at the uniformed crowd. Rivera knelt and smiled at her. "You must be Emma. Your dad's a hero, you know." Emma tilted her head. "He's just Daddy," she said, and everyone laughed softly, even Daniel, though his eyes glistened. Then Rivera handed him a small, weathered envelope. "This came through command a few years ago. It was addressed to you, but we couldn't find you. We thought, maybe now's the right time." Daniel frowned, taking it carefully. His breath caught when he saw the handwriting, delicate, looping, familiar. His late wife's. His hands trembled as he opened it. "My dearest Danny, if you're reading this, it means you finally stopped running. I know why you left the sky, for me, for Emma, but I want you to know you don't have to hide who you are. The man I loved wasn't just Falcon 1 or a hero. He was the father who reads bedtime stories, who makes pancakes too thick, who never gives up. Don't bury that fire. Emma will need to see it one day to know where she came from. Promise me you'll show her." By the time he finished, Daniel couldn't speak. The airfield was silent, the wind carrying the faint hum of engines, the echo of his past. Rivera looked at him gently. Sir, the base commander wants to offer you an honorary return flight. One last run in the sky. For her. Daniel looked down at Emma, who smiled up at him, unaware of the storm in his chest. He knelt, pressing his forehead to hers. Would you like to see where Daddy used to fly? She nodded eagerly. Can I wear your big helmet? Minutes later, as the engines roared to life, Daniel climbed back into the cockpit. Older, heavier with memories, but alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. The controls fit his hands like they always had, like they'd been waiting. And as the jet lifted off, slicing into the open blue, Emma's small voice echoed from the radio below. Go, Daddy, go! The pilots flying beside him watched in awe as Falcon 1 returned to the sky, one last time. Not as a warrior, but as a father, keeping a promise written in love.